Will Tao, Canadian immigration lawyer, graduate student, everything you said. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm also just so proud of you and your platform and what you're building.
Hello, Mr. William Tao. I'm so privileged to have you here on this podcast. William Tao, as he likes to be called, Will, is an immigration lawyer and is currently pursuing his graduate studies at the University of British Columbia, and he's going to share a little bit more about his research. I knew Will quite a couple of years ago, my part of my immigration story, and I had a friend who connected me to Will. So today I'm going to have a conversation with Will just to learn a bit more about, immigrating to Canada, his experience, being a dad and also a student and also running a thriving business as an immigration consultant firm, but also his experience also building that business. So Will, welcome, and please introduce yourself to the. Yes.
Thank you so much, Isaac. Yeah, I'm Will Tao, Canadian immigration lawyer, graduate student, everything you said. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm also just so proud of you and your platform and what you're building, a space of positivity, a
Yeah.
space of learning. As someone who's not the best numbers person, I think, I'm attracted to learning more from you about how to be more streetwise and in this economy in this changing time. So thank you for having me as your guest.
No problem. It's my privilege. And maybe you may want to tell us a little bit more about how are your studies going at the University of British Columbia. By the way, UBC is one of the top universities in Canada. So to just get into the law school itself, I think it's a great achievement. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually ironic because when I applied for law school initially, this is my JD, which is the law degree you take to practice as a lawyer. I didn't get into the University of British Columbia. I got rejected, right? So it's kind of ironic many years later, almost a decade later, coming back as this sort of mature student
Mhm.
studying. But I have such strong roots at UBC. I grew up on the campus. It was so different back then. I did my undergrad at UBC, so it's been lovely to reconnect and just I have some amazing professors and learning about a new area of law that I didn't have a previous foundation in. Has been it's been challenging, especially to balance, as you mentioned, my law practice and family, but it's been really rewarding at the same time.
Yes, that's amazing. And now that you have been studying, I know you have been doing some research on artificial intelligence, So do you wanna, share a little bit more about what you are working on and what you see the immigration, its impact on the immigration in Canada?
Yeah, so I'm specifically looking at automated decision-making systems, and these are systems that are used by immigration and other government authorities as well to process, triage, risk flag applications.
Mhm.
And yeah, it started off as just sort of an intellectual itch and some sort of thing that was frustrating me. I represent several clients, and I always thought my strength was in telling their stories to immigration. And then at a certain point in time at work, I realized my stories were not being read anymore. Right? They weren't looking at the letters, the submission letters that I was writing or the letter of explanations, and they were making decisions in a bulk fashion based off of the characteristics of my clients. So it led to this journey to try and uncover and maybe to sort of preserve or to deconstruct what I'm doing with my work. And it led me to this broader conversation of these computer systems that are slowly taking up these spaces. And I think the number one thing I've taken out of it so far is, in addition to it being very complex, and for someone like myself who doesn't come from a tech background, I think we're all being forced now to engage in technology and learn things. And it reminds me of when I was a kid trying to learn to use the computer for the first time. I think we have to continue learning, we have to continue evolving with these skills. But the other one is just that, like, there's sort of two languages happening right now in this space, right? There's a language of the tech experts, the data scientists, the people who are driving sort of where technology is going in the world. And then there's those being impacted by the technologies, the front end users,
Mhm.
the folks who are doing the regular day, be it shopping, editing, using ChatGPT,
Mhm.
and engaging with technology, and how much of a disconnect there is growing between the two. And my research and my advocacy hopefully is trying to bridge that gap now, right? And just say, hey, how do we bring in more light to light some of the challenges that folks are having with these technologies, or how the technologies are adversely impacting them, but also how do we take this very academic, technical, legal discussion and
Mhm.
maybe humble it down a bit or bring it down to the people a little bit. So that's my current journey alongside immigration work, and it's been very rewarding but very challenging. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I would say, I mean, you helped me through my immigration story here, and even, my family, and I know several clients, and I will ask you a little bit more about, your businesses. Well, as an immigration lawyer, I'm also curious, I have a lot of, youngsters from Africa, from
Yeah.
Asia, who wonder, like, how, what is the process, the journey of becoming, an immigration lawyer? What is it like, if you
Hmm.
take a step back, because for me, when someone says, oh, I studied JD, I'm an immigration lawyer, and I know in Canada there are different
Yeah.
provinces and territories. So what does it take, and what is the process for you to now practice as an immigration
Yeah.
lawyer? Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm meeting, similarly a lot of colleagues who have done law degrees overseas or practicing lawyers are now coming over. We have programs to help internationally trained lawyers or law graduates. Several colleagues are taking this. It's called the Masters of Law Common Law Program, the LMCL at Ballard. They have a program especially for foreign trained or graduate lawyers to convert. There's also the national accreditation NCA process where lawyers can take their foreign degrees, come here, do some courses, and transfer over. So there's a lot of sort of pathways for overseas lawyers to come here. And then if you're not yet, you're younger and you want to come here first to a degree, well, for most law schools, they either require either really good grades in undergrad, but more likely you need to get a first degree first before you do your law school. Yeah, those are a couple pathways, but what I would say right now is it's definitely a long journey, and you have to really enjoy. I don't want to go cliche, but lawyering isn't what it is on the TV, right? It isn't the legal television shows that people, even I thought probably going into it that the glamorousness of sort of what you see on TV, the kind of criminal lawyer or the big
Yeah.
trials or whatnot. And there are some lawyers who do that, make no mistake, and they're really brilliant and successful. But for a lot of lawyers like myself, we're sort of in the trenches of the frontline work, and some days you feel like you're more doing paperwork behind your desk and
Mhm.
than actually going out to courts and litigating or but you have to really enjoy the details and spending time with your clients, getting to know their lives, and more often than not, it's not the law that actually makes the difference. The law is the law, but it's the ability to get the right facts out to then
Yes.
convince the decision maker that the law should apply a certain way, and it's in the facts that a lot of these cases are decided. So, be a very good listener and a very good communicator. I think those are some early skills I would hone in this work.
And I know you run a Heron law firm here in British Columbia. And what
Mm-hmm.
are some of the cases that you work on? Let's say someone wants to, immigrate to Canada. What sort of cases do you deal with, on a day-to-day,
Yeah,
on average? And I know you have a whole team that supports.
yeah, yeah. So I am a bit of a general practitioner in immigration, meaning that I don't specialize just in refugee or just as a corporate immigration lawyer. I kind of do everything, right? And I do some refugee. I do most of my work is probably in temporary residence and permanent residence. Those are folks who want to come here for a work permit or study permit or visitor visa, and then they want to perhaps stay or apply for permanent residence under our economic programs, humanitarian compassion programs, sometimes the corporate, business immigration streams as well. So I do a little bit of everything.
Mhm.
Where I think our firm and my work has probably gotten the most attention is probably in navigating the cases where folks get refused or have negative outcomes, and trying to turn around when people are in a bad situation, and turn it around. And then, as a firm, I like to promote community lawyering, meaning that the firm is itself learning from the experience of our client to see how we can bring those tools, tips, tricks, information to the public, to the community, to help people who are doing it by themselves, to help people who don't have the fees to pay for legal services, to force government to adjust and change policy for good. So we kind of bring together those elements. So everything we're doing in our work is translating to some sort of advocacy or action in our practice. Yeah.
That's amazing. So Will, I get to have people mostly from Zimbabwe and other African come to me because they say, "Oh, Isaac, I want to come to Canada. What can I do?" And I say, "I'm not an immigration lawyer, and hence I'm not qualified to give you any advice." So I had a situation where, without disclosing details, a friend was asking me like, "Okay, their son was accepted for an undergraduate here in Canada," and I said, "Do I have to apply for a start permit?" Because they said, "Oh, what I have here, I got the visa." So can you maybe explain that, how the process works? Because I know when I got my visa accepted, but I got a full scholarship, everything was done through the immigration office at the University of British Columbia. And I got my visa, a student visa stamped, and that would send my passport to South Africa, to Pretoria, to the Canadian embassy. And then I got a visa that allowed me to then come here. And when I arrived at the immigration center here in Canada, they then asked me, "Why are you here?" And then I answered, and then I got the start permit that allowed me entry to enter into Canada. So do you want to maybe clarify that?
Well, you've actually explained it very, very well, right? Like that's the study permit process, right? You apply for a study permit, but the permit itself is issued at the port of entry at the border. So what you get is the visa that allows you to take a plane to come in here. It's actually an interesting time that you're bringing this up, because we're actually seeing an increase actually in the border scrutinizing the grounds by which the study permit was granted in the first place by RCC. So just because you hold a visa and an approval letter doesn't mean that the border will necessarily give you that permit, because they could still do a reevaluation. So this is actually happening in for clients, actually a lot of them from India, but different countries, where they're finding out at the border that they used like fake documents, or they had something wrong with their initial materials that wasn't caught, and they're being asked to leave or denied entry, right? So, but you're right, the process that you've mapped out, it starts with the student visa.
Yes.
You get an approval letter, and then you come here, you get your permit, and then you're on your way. And then as a temporary resident here, you have to navigate studying, extensions, complete your program. If it's eligible, you might get a postgraduate work permit, depending on how the program, it can be up to 3 years. And then you're trying to apply for an increasingly competitive economic immigration system through express entry or provincial nomination programs, right? So they're doing a lot of even changes to those programs. So in the future, it's going to be much harder to apply. It's tough though, because you're dealing with a global race to get the best talent in the world to come here, right? And you've seen two kind of colliding forces, that what I mentioned, sort of trying to attract the world's brightest and smartest, versus sort of like an increasing, I would say, right-wing nationalism that is forming in a lot of these global North Five Eyes countries, where people feel like immigration is the cause or leading to some of the problems that folks are having here in terms of access to services or housing or food prices or a whole bunch of things, really, that some of which falls into a bit of a line of scapegoating, I would say. But you know what? Hey, you have a bunch of countries with elections coming up that seems like it's all at the one time, and then you have struggling economies, and then you have immigrants, right? And there seems to be this kind of reoccurring theme that when things go wrong, the immigrants are to blame. So we'll see how much of that is statistically true versus sort of more sort of sentiment and sort of racism. But needless to say, changing policy, changing times, and definitely something to watch out for in the next couple of years. Thrive in having a lot of things to do, right? And there's some people
Yes.
and I respect the heck out of them who are good at doing that one thing. And going back to that sushi thing, right? The sushi chef.
Thank you so much, Will, for clarifying that. And I do have, also people, and I mostly refer them to you to say, this is what, Will and at his firm, that's their expertise. So let's say a lot of people, they say, I know you mentioned them, what are some of the pathways that people can consider if they want to immigrate to Canada? I know there's the skilled, the express entry, there are different pathways that the government is trying to attract specific talents, and also the entrepreneurial, immigration route. Do you want to maybe just summarize that so that
Yeah,
these people, we have an idea? But I always say go to the government website and see
yeah,
various, options. That's where the official information is.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's a good starting point too, because when you have a practice and you start getting clients, you probably will see more clients in a specific area, right? And because I'm based in Vancouver, you get specific options versus, we have a rural and northern immigration pilot. So if you're from certain communities, uh, there's even a pathway for you to immigrate. We have an agri-foods worker, we have caregivers, and
Mhm.
you'll find that certain firms and certain companies maybe have more clients in one area or another. Because my firm does so much more of the kind of fixing and cleaning up and sort of when people run awry in their application, we deal with a lot of, for example, refused economic immigrants, express entry. We do a lot of refused provincial nomination applications. We do a lot of refused humanitarian compassionate grounds applications.
Mhm.
So those are just some of the routes. There's a lot of, as you mentioned, even startup visa and entrepreneur programs, business immigration programs. Increasingly, because the scores are difficult,
Yes.
the one tip I would have for your viewers is to start learning French. I mean, this
Mhm.
is tough to say given my own journey trying to learn French has been an absolute uphill battle. But Canada immigration is really
Yes.
Canadian immigration is really emphasizing the bilingual aspect and the French language speaking aspects. There's work permits you can get.
Yes.
There's PR pathways that are based on just speaking French. So, I think it's a great opportunity if you're sort of, a high schooler or a college student looking to think about Canada in the future. It's, take some French courses, learn that, and hopefully you'll open up some pathways down the road.
Yeah, and like for the interest of viewers, Canada is bilingual. That means, there are two official languages, that is French and English. Now, you are running a thriving business. Do you wanna maybe share with us, is it easy to run a business and to
Yeah,
in payroll, also being in school, uh,
yeah,
and trying to manage all that? How do you manage, work-life balance?
yeah. And thriving is definitely how do I put it? I wouldn't I wouldn't call my business thriving. I think we're like many businesses in Vancouver surviving.
Okay.
I think we're figuring out our identity. We're still early in the game of that, and I think everything is relative, right? Thriving for one company could be surviving for another, and who are we comparing up against? Who are the big players in the game who've been doing like as a firm that's been in existence for 3 years? We shouldn't be comparing ourselves to a firm that's been here for 30 years, right? We can't just by name alone or by perhaps the network alone people aren't going to find us. We need folks like yourself who've been former clients and are advocating for the community. We need to write more blogs. We need to be more active in community, so we always put out new content, and that itself can sometimes take up a lot of time, right? Because when you're putting out content, then that's time that you need to perhaps take a couple less files so that you can focus on making sure you can still do that education piece and still do that public piece while you're still taking on meaningful files, right? So it's a very tough balance, but I think I think some other guests of yours have said it too. But it takes a community, it takes a village, it takes from your employees to the other lawyers at your firm, like everyone stepping up in their own ways. And I had this idea that I wanted to build a firm that was for community, that was,
Yes.
with racialized lawyers, with
Mhm.
doing law differently as a younger team.
Mhm.
Um, the alternative a lot of folks are taking is doing it by themselves, but that comes with its cost too, right? Because at that stage, you have to do every single little tiny document, and now I can at least put some tasks to some colleagues, and I can do certain things. So I my approach has been like, let's build up a medium size. It's not too big, not so small that there's nobody entity that just does good work, and we'll let sort of the market and where the industry goes bring us. And then also in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about new areas of the law, or perhaps what others are not covering certain areas. And in immigration, we do have quite a bit of saturation, right? You have immigration consultants who can practice, and there's some really brilliant immigration consultants, right? You have a lot of lawyers that have switched to immigration because their own industry, for example, personal injury or other areas of law, dried up, so they switched to immigration now. So, one with a lot of players in the game and different pricing and all that, it is very difficult to maintain competitiveness. But as long as you're putting out a good product and you're doing the work to research and you're looking where no one else is looking, I think it doesn't matter what industry you are, you can provide value, right? And I always akin ourselves to that, that sushi joint that's in the corner of a strip mall that maybe they're not on the back of buses. They're not winning all the awards per se. They're not always in the front page of the newspaper. Although I've been lucky to be in a little bit of media over the last couple of years. But, those who know that you're going to get the best meal of your life at that, restaurant. And you don't even want to tell as many people, because the more people that know, it may diminish the quality of it. So I'm happy being that neighborhood sushi joint that just does a really good job, right? And so that's my approach. I'm not looking to become, a 30 lawyer firm trying to run a business across the world. I have too much of a creative, independent soul that needs my own time and space and stuff for family. That's what we'll get to. That I don't want to grow too quickly, but I still need people to work with. I can't do it all by myself. I'm not a lone wolf. I realize I thrive off of the energy that people bring me. So, I think I've hopefully found the right balance right now.
Excellent, Will. Now, I know a lot of lawyers, they burn the midnight candle. Metaphoric, from Zimbabwe, like sometimes, people, even here, there are a lot of cases and files that we are handling, but also there's the family aspect. How do you balance being a father, a husband, an immigration
Yeah.
student? Is there any specific strategy that you use? Because I'm aware you posted a very interesting blog.
Yeah. In last winter, a lot of people actually told me that they read it and they reflected on sort of, the similar challenges they were having. And I kind of I think it was a New Year's thing, but just in the year, I was like, listen, I failed in so many ways. Like it was a year where I think I fell short on everything. And, and that's the thing, was like, you can't be the best student, the best lawyer, and the best father all at once. Like something's got to give, right? And if it doesn't even capture by those three, you're probably missing something else. Or are you the best spouse? Are you the best at making sure the dishes get done at the end of the night? Like you can't be the best at everything. So not that I've stopped trying. I don't think stop trying is also the option, but you give it the best shot you can, right? And I think through the process, I've also learned to understand myself better, right? And this is going to be kind of weird to say this, but I thrive in having a lot of things to do, right? And there's some people,
Yes.
and I respect the heck out of them, who are good at doing that one thing. And going back to that sushi thing, right? The sushi chef that can stay there every day, work as a master for 40 years, do the same movements, and just every day they're just slowly crafting their work a little bit better. And they run that one shop. They have the same schedule every day from 8 to 4, 8 to 5. Well, for me, I realized I can't do that. Like I thrive in maybe too much chaos, or I just thrive in like every day being a little bit different and being able to make something out of nothing in a day, right? But to me, that's the freedom side, but there's baselines to that. And the baseline to me is family, and that's the core of everything. So my firm was started in the middle of the pandemic because I realized with a family coming, I want to have more freedom. And that freedom involves not being tied to necessarily an office downtown. That freedom is not tied to anybody else's perhaps billing expectations or salary expectations or the politics of any other business. I want to run my own thing and think about that as a legacy project for my family. So that's what led me to start my own firm. And we have a bunch of parenting fails. I mean, some days you're not there as much, or you have to study all night, and you leave your spouse to do a lot of the work, and that those days you feel super guilty for. But the one thing I've generally felt pretty good about is daycare pickups, daycare drop-offs,
Yes,
weekends,
yes.
things that a traditional lawyer would have to sacrifice because of the nature of the machine that is law.
Yeah.
I've been able to recalibrate that so I don't have to, right? But my weekends are generally for family. If I have some time, I'll do a little bit of studying. Um, the mornings and the drop offs and pickups are non-compromised, right? I don't schedule meetings during that time, right? Versus if you're at a business that was bigger, or perhaps the other people who worked there had other expectations, then you might have to play the game in order to survive.
Yeah.
So for me, it's redefining the game, choosing your own game, and sacrificing, right? Like obviously, the route I'm choosing is not going to make me, going to your streetwise economics theme, like money making wise, like I'm probably not, my revenue is not going to be skyrocketing with the way that I'm working, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, because for me, having meals with my family every night and being able to make sure I'm there for drop offs and pickups is higher value to me than try to build whatever amount of money to actually be super wealthy, right? To me, that will come over time and experience, and maybe not even in this job, right? So those are,
Interesting. But I think something that is outstanding, I know you're an outstanding lawyer, at least from my experience, Will, is you had the skills to actually start your own consulting firm, and also you're the co-founder, and you also had, the experience. I think you worked, for various law firms, as I know, right? And then
mhm.
the appropriate time you then decide to work. And I also pick out and correct me if I'm wrong, to say, for you, I think you like to balance things, and I think that's a very important point. Even now, I'm also going to pick up our son, uh,
Yeah.
something that is important, but the flexibility of me working from home as a consultant,
Hmm.
creating my content, it's a long-term game. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, what I have seen. A lot of people, sometimes they think like, oh, it's get rich quick skill. But
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is, you have to be prepared to put in some work, to learn, to be humble. You are going to school, you are,
Hmm.
improving on your skill set. So I think that's a very interesting thing. So
Yeah.
you wanna share anything about, like, personal finance and investing, like what was your experience, uh,
Yeah. That's why I'm listening to your podcast, because I think I personally need to learn more about that. I operate better, and I think this is maybe a tip. Like I have good people in my corner, so I have an amazing financial planner. My spouse is also good with my numbers and my books,
okay.
and it allows me to focus on what I'm good at, which is not necessarily numbers.
Yeah.
So I trust them as well, right? And to put trust into people who are good for your numbers. And obviously, there are times when you have to make decisions and when to invest for your business, especially when to add another salary, when to I mean, I remember even just personally when you're in the process of buying a place, to think about mortgages and all that.
Exactly.
So that's my first sort of tip, is have really good people in your corner. My accountant is one of the best accountants in the world, and he keeps my business in check. So those are important things. Um, in general, I think it's, as like a lot of other lawyers, it's an area we need to grow more in, right? Like a lot of lawyers are good lawyers, but we're not the best business people, and that's what makes some of the immigration consultants actually very successful. They're very good business people. So I think there's a right balance to learn. There's more to learn about financing. There's more to learn about making investments and passive investments. And some of the lawyers that I admire, they're doing courses, they're doing podcasts,
Yeah.
they're writing books, they're figuring out ways to make the money work for them. But the one thing for me too is, like, I've never been afraid to invest in people. I think that's sort of my what I would say, right? It's I take a lot of value and pride in supporting salaries and in hiring good people, and um, I'm a firm believer in that win-win model where you pay someone their worth, and more than their worth in a city like Vancouver. We have to pay people living wages, and once they do great work, it'll pay back to the firm, it'll pay back to the company, right? So I definitely, I have a lot of time and space for people who are good people, and I definitely, if someone is getting lowballed or mistreated or not. I like to run a very flexible ship at work. I don't like to micromanage, and I think those are things that I kind of bring to my own financial approach to stuff too, right? I don't like to spend too much time digging into things at this stage. I let smarter people handle them, and I focus on the relationships. So that's what I'm good at, right?
That's fantastic. And I think I always tell people to say, for me, I have a background in economics and finance, but
Yeah.
I spend quite a lot of time, monitoring what's going on in the markets and stuff like that. So it's not for everyone. So a lot of people then sometimes they make that mistake to say, well, I want to do this, and then you lose money. So fortunately, in Canada, they are financial advisors. Your money, it's your responsibility. I think that's very, very important. But also having other people, you know, look into that who are specialists, they look into that and they do that for you. And of course, you have to be critical and ask, questions, particularly about the fee
Hmm.
and all these things, because it's your money, right? It's
Yeah.
not. So I think that's a very interesting
Yeah.
thing, to learn from.
Yeah. And you appreciate that more being a professional too, because like I mean the same thing, like immigration in general is made for everyone to do, right? But some people run into big issues or some problems and they rely on your professionalism. So, and people pay you fees that are sometimes more than they can possibly, or it's a big investment for them to get good advice. So as a professional, it would be really hypocritical of me to then say, you know what, I'm not willing to pay someone else for that same level of advice, right? So I think that's definitely given me a lens to like everyone has their expertise and to listen to them and to take obviously keep your own evaluation and your gut instinct and those type of things are still very healthy and discussing and not jumping into things. I think we're in this really fast moving consumer market now where you have a tendency to say yes to everything and you want to like online shopping, you see something you really want, you just want to buy it right away, you don't even think about it, like what are other people thinking about it, the reviews, the sizing, does it fit, the feel of it, the roots of things. So I don't think we should throw those out of the door. But doing our own homework is really important, but relying on experts to help and guide
Mhm.
our decisions is just as important. So I take those two sort of in tandem.
Yeah, I generally come from a society where sometimes people, may not generally, I'm saying generally because not everyone.
Yeah.
Sometimes it saves you time, for example, hiring an immigration lawyer to then take care of your situation. That person is a specialist and they do that. You do that with your finances and stuff. And of course, people may say, oh, I don't have the money. But the truth of the matter is the mistakes that you are more likely to make if you do
Mhm.
things that you don't understand, you are going to end up paying more money, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And we say that all the time. It's so much more expensive to try and fix something versus trying to avoid it in the first place, right? And sometimes that initial call just to get a roadmap, you may feel like you're not leaving with like a tangible something, but that knowledge or that sort of being aware and cautious can help avoid mistakes in the end that are life impacting. So no, I think that's really sage advice.
And now I think as we are about to wrap up the conversation, are
Yeah.
there like some things that you would like to say, like challenges or things that you would like to make, the audience aware, especially my audience who may be saying, okay, I want to immigrate to Canada, what are the things that they should do? Because the reality is
Yeah.
quite different because I've seen in our community, some people they come here, they are stuck, they ended up, trying to raise funds for immigration lawyers. But
Hmm.
technically, they would be maybe thinking like, oh, if I come in here as a visitor, I can easily change my
Yeah.
immigration status into this. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of myths in the work too, right? There's a lot of folks that, I mean, online forums are a double-edged sword. People get good information from there. It's a community of people experiencing the same things, but it can also be a space, a lot of misinformation and wrong advice and people who don't know what they're talking about. So take everything with a grain of salt, especially from local agents, right? You know, I would say a large majority of those overseas, unless they have sort of a consultant license, if a couple will also have lawyers' licenses, but ask to see their credentials, right? Make sure you're verifying the advice, especially if they're like, hey, you should do it yourself. I'll just help you. You pay me, but I don't want my name to show up on it. Like, question what that is, right? Is there a proper review retainer in place, or is that just someone who's an agent trying to make some money, but then ultimately throwing the risk at you, right? Another thing is to like know your own documents, right? The immigration process isn't one where you just toss all your paperwork or answer a questionnaire and then everyone's submitting your stuff for you. I think I've seen too many heartbreaking stories of folks who just don't know what was submitted, didn't know what was in their application. So take responsibility for it. Make sure ultimately your behind is on the line, not whoever agent, especially if they're overseas. They probably have very low liability, right? And some folks, for financial reasons, they're like, hey, I want to do this. Some companies will offer them maybe like a refund. If we're not successful, we'll give you your money back in immigration. You should have some red flags on something like that, right? Because number one, why is the service provider providing that kind of promise when they're putting their time, energy, and effort into something that is not in their control, right? And number two, if they're willing to do that, what things are they willing to put in that application or say or do in order to try and get that result? And that's when you start seeing them not disclose, be it a previous refusal or fudging numbers or making up information, and that can have huge negative detrimental effects. And that's where it goes back to do your homework too, right? You can rely on vet your experts, know that they're the right people, but also do your own homework and challenge everything they say with a grain of salt. I love nothing more in a client meeting when I have a client who's like, hey, I did my homework, I actually looked into this myself, and maybe what you're saying is not up to date, or maybe I have a different view. And I like that, right? And sometimes they may be even right. Like they might have seen something in a forum that I didn't see, right? And on the ground, there's actually a different impact than what's in the books, right? So, those are some tips I would have for people preparing the process. And then, like you mentioned earlier, just investing a little bit now can save a lot of heartache and pain at the end. A consultation for half an hour to an hour to just make sure you know where the pitfalls are can help you avoid those pitfalls. Whereas avoiding a misrepresentation finding or trying to fight, not only are those legally challenging, but the cost of doing those through courts or through other methods is very, very expensive. And I don't like to see people who've fallen into traps. So that's from my own perspective and how I practice. Those are just some tips I'd have for your listeners.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Will. So is there anything else that you would want to, share with my audience from your experience as an immigration lawyer and in life in general?
No, I mean, I just want to thank you again for providing the space and for providing so many cool folks. I mean, some of which I know as well that have been your previous guests. And I think it's just, too often in this space, you hear only one type of voice, and even in the stuff I'm doing on AI, like you have these sort of mostly white kind of tech bros, or, if it's in politics, mostly older white men. And I'm grateful that you're highlighting the voices of women, people of color, racialized individuals, different people from different experiences, because the way and what we bring into to our lives and what we came from, the values, the foundations, the diasporas we came from, all those things impact us differently. We navigate life through different colored lenses and different, with a different set of shoulders on us than other folks. So I think it's good to hear these different stories, and they mean a lot to the listeners. So I'm grateful to be part of that too.
Yes, Will. And I'm going to also put the website to your organization, so that at least if some of the audience may want to contact you guys for immigration work, that would be great. But also, in conclusion, something that I have been surprised with, I have had a few guests who have actually volunteered, particularly ladies, and the first thing that they say is, Isaac, thank you so much for giving us this voice. So I think I'm like, I didn't understand the impact, like that, giving someone a platform. Of course, it's a growing channel, but I think the fact that, you learn from other people, I may take this for granted because I know you're a message away. There's a few other people, but I'm trying to then bring this access to the audience to say, okay, these are some unsung heroes that we have. And, you can learn from them and we can learn from each other. So please make sure you can comment if you have any other questions so that we can learn from each other. Will, thank you so much. And I hope you have a good long weekend. I guess you will be working somehow. and happy Canada Day.
Yeah, happy Canada Day to you too, and all the best to your family. And yeah, let's make it through the rest of the year. I think there's the weather is turning up, the energy is up, and hopefully we can sustain it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank you. Take care.